But
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our fifth episode of our post watch of season 2 of Wheel of Time. I am Fantasy Awash. I am joined by the lovely Christopher Navo, and we like to talk about the differences between the show and the book. We like to get into the nitty gritty. Hey, Chris, we like to talk about things that we liked, things that we didn't like, and we love when people engage with us and share their opinions on the episode. So if you've watched it, feel free to let us know your comments as we're talking, and we'll try our best to acknowledge and get to them as we go. But our general state of being, I always ask you at the beginning of an episode, is out of 10, how would you rank our episode?
I, I it,
We're off to a good start.
yeah, no, just putting like I said, it's to the point where I just have to eliminate any kind of book and what I always hope and dream for the Wheel of
Yeah.
Time. But all in all, I do give this. I enjoyed this episode for a lot of reasons, and I think this one was a little higher for me, and I think it was maybe like a low, kind of like a week 7, but a
Okay.
7 nonetheless. I just had I don't know, I had a better time with this episode.
All right. I honestly don't know how I can rank this episode, and maybe I'll have a clearer delineation of that at the end of our discussion. What I will say is that there were things that I liked about this episode. There were things that I was neutral on, and there were things that I actively disliked.
Yeah,
So it's
and
a
I'm
mixed
sure I'm
bag.
sure we're gonna agree on the dislikes.
Yeah, it was a mixed bag, but the beginning of the episode, and I've got to just say this, like, I am very immersive with music. So music to me is really integral for a story. Like when you hear the music for Lord of the Rings, you're transported. Game of Thrones, same thing. The music in this show takes me out of this show, which I'm finding really difficult the more we get into it. I'm like, what is happening here?
I I feel like the music is too modern, kind of too relatable. I feel like I agree with the music a little bit. I now they did it when they had the intro that put me into the
Yes.
show a little
I
more.
loved the intro music, and they've now gotten rid of it, which I don't love. So,
Yeah,
but specifically the Shanshan music, I find to be so high pitched that whenever I hear it, I'm like, "Oh," and it really does take me out of it a little bit, which it's frustrating in the sense that that is literally how this episode started, is you have that, like, blaring of the music, and they kind of do this, like, sweep in of Falm. And we open with the Shan Chen, and we see that Lady Saroth is having to supplicate. And now we are shown officially that Ingtar and Loyal are in their new garb, their new getup kind of thing. Which I also found to be weird. I'm not sure why they're being given a place of esteem. It almost felt like it's not like they don't look enslaved to me, kind of thing.
I don't think. I think the way the Sanchen did approach people, and and I could be wrong on this, and maybe somebody in the comments will help me on this. I do remember them pretty much kind of giving people free will as long as they already like sort of bend the knee. If we want to use a Game of
Yeah,
Thrones thing, if they bend the knee, they could go about their business. And I do think they were allowed some like held to their own person a little bit. I don't think they were like actually like slaves like
sure.
Dame. But of course they had to swear fealty to the Sanche.
Right. So Patrick brings up a good point here. Thank you, Patrick, of mentioning the blood, which a big thing for me, and I'm going to come out and say it now. So, like, we're clear about this going forward with our discussion of this episode. I said it last episode and I'll say it this episode. I think this show is not doing a good job of giving enough background to people that do not know certain things from the books. So, for example, the blood was mentioned a few times, like, you're not of the blood, you're not of the blood. people have no context for what that means. And specifically, then the Forsaken. So we'll get into that more so as the episode progresses. But that for me is probably my main gripe at this point, is that I feel like this show doesn't stay in a lane, in that it's either catering to book readers with things like the blood and ideas of the Forsaken, but then at the same time veers off and does stuff that is completely left field from the books. So I wish that they would kind of just pick one. But this is a question that I keep asking people, and I wish I knew people who weren't book readers for this that are watching this show, so I could ask them and say, do you actually know what's going on? Because with certain key points, I feel like they're not giving any contextual background for that whatsoever, and I'm finding it very difficult.
No, I agree. No, I agree, and it is tough as a book reader because we know what some of these terms mean, and so we forget that if someone's just watching this blind, like you said, what do they know? What do they know about Camlin? What do they know about Elaine's role
Right.
as a daughter heir? Or we were talking about how the imprisonment of the Forsaken, how does that function? If you read the books and you get a little bit of the background, you know those things, but when you watch the TV show, you really don't have a great understanding of certain things.
Right.
And I think the Sanchan is a big part of that as well here.
Sure. I mean, like what Patrick's saying here, I think that they can definitely understand that the Shanshan are a hierarchical society. Like, it's not my gripe isn't with stuff like that, because I feel like that's fairly transparent. It's more so when they're getting into nitty gritty of stuff, like the importance of the Forsaken. I feel like there really hasn't been enough background that's been given on the Forsaken as of this point, and then things like the blood and stuff like that, which is very niche. I understand. I'm being a bit nitpicky, but that's fine. What do you think of our opening scene here with Lady Sarath having to get a manicure and bow down kind of thing?
Yeah, very, very be demoted here. I'm still kind of getting over Ishi being so prominent.
Involved,
Involved. I always imagined this particular Forsaken behind the scenes, like not even like there. He is, I think, taking on more of the political roles that some of the other Forsaken did.
Yes.
I just don't think they're changing the character and all again, and that's fine. That's fine, because I think they are melding multiple Forsaken together. So as to this whole scene with this like demotion of Lady Sarath, I feel like, because like you just mentioned, we don't have an understanding of the hierarchy, so we always assumed that she was of higher than Lord Torok.
Yeah.
And to allow something like that to happen, is like I expected more of a emotional response from her, like not just. And she did look over to Ishmael for like, what am I really doing this?
Right.
So I think that was kind of why she was so submissive to doing that, because otherwise I think, because we're talking about hierarchy and that's very important in their culture, she would never have done that. She would have made that man like just kill him or something because of
Agreed.
that. Yeah.
So this is something that we kind of talked about in our last episode. I can't remember who brought it up in the comments. It's someone that's regularly here, so I'm sorry that I can't pinpoint exactly who it is, but who was going to give Lord Turok the horn of Valir. So this is something, again, he's presented the horn by Pat and Fane, which is appropriate. Like, that's fine. Him knowing immediately that it's the horn of Valir is weird to me, because the horn is supposed to be this like mysterious thing, and it's not something that like, oh, that box must contain the horn of Valir because I've heard it described in all of these different ways. Like, it just seemed very awkward to me that like he immediately knew it was the horn of Valir. I was like, what?
Yeah, and I'm trying to, and I'm And I find it funny that we don't actually we still don't see too much of what that horn looks like. I
Yep.
think they're probably keeping that obviously as probably the ending
The
surprise.
secret,
And,
yeah.
yeah, the big secret at the end is what the horn does. And I did find it interesting that he knew what to do, what to open this, complex box to open the up the horn. I'm trying to remember, and again, we can't really reference books at this point, but I mean, we are this this chat is basically the differences between the books and the
Yeah.
TV show. So I don't remember if the Sanchin ever actually get
So
hold of the horn in the books. Do
I
they?
don't remember him instantly knowing how to open it. Maybe because that who it was initially presented to, like the collector of old things, was that Turok in the
Sure,
book?
I think. Yeah.
Because my understanding was that like he was told by Patton Fane that it was the Horn of Valir. He didn't immediately know that it was that, but I could be misremembering that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That
Agreed.
Daniel, I'm glad you brought that up because I totally agree with that. I didn't like the whole there's there is this casualness to Patton in the books where he's very self-assured of himself. And there's a few times he's been brought down by superiors, and then you get his inner dialogue. Well, I'll bring you down, one of these days,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So he does have an arrogance to him, both presented in the book. I just think the way it was presented in here, it was just a little. I actually
Yeah.
I actually kind of
100% agree.
laughed. I mean, I was happy they're showing him a little more, and I mean that was all we got from him. But
Yeah.
I feel like um, they're kind of missing an opportunity with Patton Fane. As much as they, yeah, I agree, Elena. I think as much as they push up a lot of these other minor characters in the show, I feel like Patton Fane's actually getting pushed further down. I mean, we totally missed the prison scenes in
Yes.
the beginning, and that was a really strong element to us as
Yeah.
readers, and then hopefully as viewers. I don't think viewers are really the blind viewers just watching the show without reading the books are really invested in Patton Fane.
I agree. If you see whiskers, my cat
Yeah.
keeps rubbing the cat. Can you move, please? I will say, yeah, it just doesn't. I didn't love it, but it is what it is,
Mhm.
and I can't gripe on it all that much. But
Mhm. This
okay,
was yeah, I think this was one of those neutral scenes for me to,
yeah.
just kinda like
I
I
agree, Elena. I very much agree. So Celine healing herself was kind of what we predicted in that they want to use the same actress, which I'm fine with because in terms of confusing the audiences even more at this point, I'm like, just stay with the same actress. You guys were kind of mentioning the eye thing last week. I, of course, haven't gotten to that point in the book, but I know that when a Forsaken is killed, basically that they can transfer bodies, but that's not something that they're going about here. But it does look along with the eye healing thing that there's taint weaving that's going on around
yeah,
her.
the it's called, I think, the Saw.
Yeah.
Saw, yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
cool. Thanks, Elena.
that was
And then
I thought that was good.
yeah, and
One of the better things.
I think it's like an overuse of power that really like it kind of leaves lasting effects on them, even for female Forsaken,
Yeah.
or any female channeler that just uses too much of that. So
Hmm.
it does
Yeah.
leave a lasting impression on that. I like the touch that they added to that in this. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool.
So Maureen in this episode, and this has been a trend over this season, is that she's so unlikable. And I'm really struggling with this because I want to like Maureen because I like book Maureen so much. But she is straight up abusing power and authority at this point when she presents the ring to the horse keeper and then kills that poor other horse. Like I understand the intention
I
behind it, but I
Yeah,
was like,
I
"Ooh."
don't get the intention of that. She could have just, I don't know, released it in the wild.
Exactly. Like it was so
Or
unnecessarily dramatic.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. I get it that she is this desperate to hang on to Rand.
Yes.
But again, we're not relaying that to the audience. I don't think it's being relayed to the audience that this is why she's doing these. We got that
Right.
in Terran Fairy last season, and
Yeah.
she stated, she goes, my job is, to keep you guys alive at all costs.
Yes.
Thing. I think something along those lines. Those probably weren't the exact words, but she said something
Right.
like that. It's to remind us, the viewers, that you guys are the most important chosen one trope kind of thing.
Yeah.
And and I think it just needed to be kind of like reminder, because I wanted Rand to like question her why, the necessary of cutting the horse. And then, as Elena said here, later on, I mean, with the woman, the horse master. I mean,
Yeah, just straight up uses that woman as bait, like 100%. It was absolutely horrible. Yeah, I mean, I get that the stakes are as high as possible, but again, they haven't conveyed that because we don't quite yet understand the Forsaken. So there's a lot of issues in this for me.
I will say, I think this is the first time we saw a little bit of like a rated R kind of moment here with Lanfear, with that man who tried to help her and got his head popped off.
Yes.
That was like, I mean, that was like, as morbid as it sounds, I think that was kind of needed to really establish the danger of this. And and my spouse pointed out something, actually, with Aes Sedai, you see them manually weaving, using their hands. With her, we don't see that. And I think it shows a little more that she has a control of her power where she doesn't need to involve a lot of movement when she weaves.
Issue is the same. They both kind of do like a flick, and it seems to maybe be like a Forsaken move that they've both kind of picked up. We saw obviously that he was weaving more significantly when he broke her seal, but I feel like that was a different scenario as opposed to just general use of the one power.
Right.
But yeah, it was ridiculous that they killed that horse, and then like a second later, a dude shows up on a horse. I was like, this is just plot armor. Like, it's so convenient. Like, move along, whatever. It is what it is. But the thing that, okay, I'm gonna mention it once, as I do every episode. Perrin's mouth was agape in the whole episode. Perrin. And Perrin and Elias have already parted ways. So Perrin is getting zero information about his stuff. Like, it's so ridiculous. Me too, Daniel. I had such rage. It was ridiculous. I was so upset.
I was like, why? Yeah.
But like, Perrin, come on. We're just starting to get the tip of the iceberg of what's going on with him. And we get a little snippet of that in this episode where Perrin's basically like, oh, are my eyes going to turn that color permanently? And Elias is like, yup. And then they part ways. And I was like, what is going on here? This is so fast. What? So, it's
and
just.
I think it's funny that they changed the Hopper Perrin dynamic. I think, from my memory in the book, Hopper did not like Perrin until what happens with Hopper, and then he becomes like a mentor to him. And it's like all the pack was like against, I noticed how the pack like all kind of converged on there, and
they were like, oh, we like Elias.
ready to rip out Perrin's throat there. I didn't care for that too much. I think
well, they're dipping from that well again, right? Of mentioning his wife again. And it's like, why? Like, move on. None of us want to acknowledge that Perrin was married.
I know. I was like, I was hoping that would kind of just get pushed under the rug, kind of like
they're really holding on to it. They're not wanting to let that one die. So I mean, it is what it is. But the Hopper and Perrin thing with the imagery, of course, like this didn't happen in the book because of the fact that Uno's not dead. So that's a big difference, but it brings about something in a way later that I was okay with, but we'll get to that in a minute. So Moiraine and Rand are on their saunter, through the wilderness or whatever. And then we see the cruelty of Lanfear. They're trying to kind of communicate that to the audience, that this isn't someone that you should mess around with. I'm fine with that because we need to know the extent of what Forsaken are willing to do, how they'll do it. Like that, I'm okay with. Um, Moraine and Rand's dynamic is super weird at this point because I feel like I don't know, it's so awkward. Um and I couldn't get into it with them, at least not in the beginning. I got a bit more comfortable with it later. But what are you thinking of our Rand Moraine dynamic at this point?
This is a little more. I like the appreciation that they're not arguing again with each other. I'm tired of
Yes, thankfully.
honestly. I am tired of the arguing back and forth. So I do appreciate this dynamic. Again, it goes back to I feel like he's a little too much newer Rand kind of thing, or
Yeah.
as I call him, and you haven't gotten there, more Isle Waste land with
Yeah.
Rand, where he has more of a mission, more of knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Here, I feel like he did go back a little bit, uh, looking towards Moraine for help, and
Mhm.
I do like that part. But there is something weird about this, like you said. There's something like just I don't know what it is. I feel like
Yeah.
it's almost intimate and um
Yeah, it was
it's
just it was a little weird, but that's
yeah.
fine.
So I mean, yeah, it's a really big nitpick. I just again would appreciate a little more like pushback. I did want a little more pushback on Ran for like having to use that stable master
Yeah.
woman. I mean, we know she got killed. I mean, they had to know she got killed. Ram would have known
Yeah.
that. I mean, she didn't get killed. I mean, her mouth disappeared, but you can't eat, you can't drink, so you're gonna eventually suffocate or
Yeah.
die from
You're gonna die from
dehydration.
starvation or
Yeah,
thirst, yeah.
dehydration or something. So it's actually worse than getting your head popped off, I think.
Yeah,
So,
that at least is swift. Um, but one thing
but
I will say is that the Perrin and Hopper line brings them back to where they were.
yeah,
And I'm okay with them switching Avienda to this. Like this for me is one of the few changes that kind of makes sense because this plot line does happen in the book, but it's of course with a male Aiel.
mhm,
Um, but other than that, it's kind of spot on from
mhm,
the book. Like he realizes that there's an Aiel in a cage, that this person is still alive. He doesn't want anyone to be caged, so he goes out of his way to free them. There is an ensuing fight, and the Aiel, of course, kicks their ass because it's an Aiel. But we see
mhm.
that they've just kind of reversed that with Avienda. So I'm okay with this change, even though it is not the way we meet Avienda in the book.
Right. No, and I agree. And I think one of the things the show has done really well has been their interpretation of the Children of the Light. I've been really impressed with that aspect. I think we get our other main Children of the Light here with Dane,
Yep.
the son of Jareth.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
But so he's got a role to play if they continue on with his storyline.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they brought him on board. Uh, I like the interaction that he had with Perrin, and finding basically a little more about uh, the children, or just why about the Isle and why they're
Yeah.
in cages and what all of that. So I appreciated a little bit of this scene particularly.
Okay, so
Um,
one thing, and I want to know if you have caught on to this too, because this is something I've noticed from several episodes. In the books, my understanding is that despite Manetheren, like old Manetheren, being an important historical place, the Two Rivers is kind of this like podunk place that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know about. And all of these people point to stuff and they're like, that's Two Rivers weaving. That's from the Two Rivers. And I'm like, how would you even know that? Like, it seems very odd to me that they're making, I get that they're probably trying to plan ahead in the sense that Two Rivers is going to become more important in the storyline going forward, and therefore they're trying to establish that now. But it's just kind of funny to me that this like middle of nowhere place is now famous for the way it stitches, the way that it makes things. I'm like, it's not.
I think it was intentional to have him call out tourists because that's eventually where we know that the White Cloaks are going to be heading towards next,
Yeah.
especially to if they continue with that storyline, that's where
Yeah.
they're going to head next. They're going to kind of just set up camp there. They know that that's where Perrin's from at least, and then potentially other people. Egwene, they might remember that Egwene was there from there too.
Right.
So things of that sort. So yeah, it's kind of like it kind of reminded me a little bit of like Star Wars, where Tatooine is supposed to be this planet nobody's ever heard of,
Yeah.
and then like every other show that they put out in Star Wars takes place in Tatooine.
Yeah. Become like the most populated place in the galaxy.
Like,
Yeah, 100%.
but it's out of the way, right?
Yes.
So
Okay. I want to talk about the fact that I wore my Ravenclaw shirt specifically because Cho Chang is a brown Aja, and it made my heart sing because Chris knows this. I've talked about the fact that I love a test. I love all of that kind of stuff. I am 1000% a brown Aja, and I am like a Ravenclaw is imprinted in my soul. So the fact that they have literally put to screen that Ravenclaw is brown Aja, I was like, I'm here for this. This is what I'm living for right now with this episode. So for that, for me, was the best part of the episode. I loved all of the brown Aja stuff. Like that to me was so good. I loved it.
Yeah, I love that we started immediately into a kind of a library. I love the interaction Varen has with her brown sisters. I'm glad we're establishing another color, Aja, and a little bit of what they're about. And I think, yeah, I agree. Every scene we had with Viren in this episode, I felt
good.
Went back a little bit into book Viren.
Yes.
And
much
it
so,
was
yes.
really appreciative. She was just kind of like very lackadaisical with her questioning, but she was also knowing
just
that
like
she was
so
like
witty and sassy at the same time. I was like, oh,
but it was
you.
very, and it was very like, oh, I hear that we had sisters. Oh, I hear they're not here anymore.
Yeah, I'm wondering where they've gone. Oh, have you also been out of the White Tower? It was so good. I've said it before. Like, I love the actress that they have for Varen. She's not at all who I would have pictured, but she's so good. So good. So I loved that. And I loved the dynamic with every character she had in this episode. She is top notch. Love Varen. So I was really happy with that stuff.
I seem to remember, like, when I was reading it, I was reading these chapters with Varen and her interaction with the boys during the Great Hunt. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of liking this.
She's great. Yeah, she's so great. And she was laying traps and she was doing it like a boss. She was awesome. So I was here for that plot line. Of all the stuff in this episode, like that was hands down the best.
Yeah, this was one of my big highlights for me.
So it then goes from there to the ways. All right. And I had a moment where I paused this and was like, how the F did Leandrin carry these people into the ways? And thankfully it was addressed later. But I was sitting there going like, what?
Yeah, I was that way too. I was like, what is she, like, Hulk woman? I mean,
exactly. I was like, they're still all unconscious.
She's like single-handedly, wheeling 3 unconscious girls into the ways, or
exactly.
Somewhat
I mean, as we kind of suspected, they're trying to flesh out Leandrin's character, give her reasoning for why she's become a Black Aja. It's not anymore that she's just a terrible person. It's the fact that she's motivated to save her son in some way, shape, or form. We don't know if that's to ease his suffering, give him eternal life, like whatever that is. But this conversation between her and Nynaeve, I think, is actually a very good conversation. I like it. I don't really have many notes other than the fact that I sat there confounded by the fact that I was like, how on earth did she get all of these girls into the
I like this too. I would have preferred. I still would have preferred the whole like actual. No, let me reword this. I at first would have still liked the whole surprise when they were. Here's the Sanchin, totally like surprised that Leandrin.
Yeah, we were spoiled with that.
But at the same time, I'm kind of glad in this different direction a little bit that it happened prior to them walking the ways and meeting the Sanchin. Because I think this interaction with Nynaeve was really cool because Nynaeve was actually just feeling really defeated here. I think she was generally, she shows a lot of hurt here. And I think this is why we would think the first thing Nynaeve would do was like rage,
right,
into rage mode, try to break bond and get out of that. But here I think she was so defeated, and I think she really grew to trust Leandrin here to this point. So it was I liked the change. I thought that was a pretty cool.
I was fine with it.
Doing it too, and of course,
So, like you said, it was kind of spoiled, the whole thing with the Seanchan, and that's because this conversation that Lady Suroth has with Ishii. And again, this is where we're getting into my gripe in that it's very specific language in that people who are not book readers are not going to understand it. So she says, my leashes, which I mean does come into play later, but there's also the you are not of the blood. I directly wrote that down and I was like, okay, this is like we're mentioning this blood thing again, and it's going to come up again at the end of the episode. So there was that. And then Ishii says the last battle will be here. So we know at this point they're finally like gearing people towards being in Falme. Like that is what the intention should be, is that most people will end up in Falme by the end. So it's fine. But yeah, it does ruin that element of shock reveal when the girls are gifted over to the Seanchan, because in the book you're like, oh, when you read it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's kind of why I still wanted that, because we weren't sure of Leandrin's motivations until that moment when you open the gate and there's the Sanchin and you're like, oh shit,
Exactly. Did he say Tarmanganan? I don't remember, honestly. He may have. If someone else caught this specifically, please let Elena know, because I did not. But one thing I will say is the cage scene, I think, ends up being very good, because that's what we then jump back to. And the language is good when he releases her from the cage. My water is yours. This is very much the language of the Aiel. So that's all great.
And I'm glad it was explained to what Poe was. Also, she immediately explained to him. And I think it's great that we had a naive character as Perrin in this. So it got explained in a proper way without exposition, because he needed to know what Toe was to her. And I'm glad it was well presented. See, that was well presented to me. We got the information, I like this. And we get a little bit of their culture immediately.
Yes, exactly. And then we see also culturally for the Aiel, she asks Perrin Ibarra, do you like to dance? And raises her veil. So like these are all cultural things that they're showing, not telling necessarily. And I think this is good. I like this part of it. I like that we have a standoff with the White Cloaks. Valda, of course, isn't present in this scene, but we saw that he was there earlier. So that's Perrin's kind of acknowledgement that Egwene didn't kill Valda. Valda's still alive. But all in all, I like the Aviendha scene, the fight scene. I felt that the fight scene went on a little bit too long, personally. I would have cut it by like 30 seconds. And I feel like that probably would have been enough. But I get that they're really trying to hone in on a point that like, the Aiel women are really good fighters. And it's like, we know, but that's fine.
No, I will say I actually liked the fight, even if it.
I thought it was good. I thought it was good.
I can see why you might have thought definitely went on a little long, but
Yeah.
there was a lot of guys there.
Yeah, I mean,
But
that's the thing. You gotta kill a lot of people at the end. So,
and
I
then
mean, like,
and then plus for show reasons, I mean, we haven't really had a really good fight sequence, I don't think, yeah, in the
no,
show.
not since our cold open
Yeah, not
with
since
at the Dragon Mount. So there's that. And Perrin also has an axe while this is happening. So that's like a little subtle nod again for the book reader, I suppose. Dean, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I thought that
Yep.
was good as
Good call
well.
out there, Chris. Yeah.
This is one of the few scenes I feel like the whole exchange between Avienda and Perrin, where they've taken a lot of book material and they've done it correctly, even though they've altered a few things. So if this was the basis of the show and the foundation of what they were doing with all of the episodes, this would be an excellent show all the time. But of course, unfortunately, they are not doing that. Also uses the hammer. Yeah. So Perrin is, of course, kind of like leaning into a little bit of those things, those aspects of Perrin. So that's okay. But
And I'm
go ahead.
glad they introduced Avienda earlier than we
Yeah.
expected. I think that was needed. I like the fact also that they kind of put Rand's women with everybody else except Rand.
Mhm.
Min's with Matt, Avienda's with Perrin,
Yeah.
Elaine, of course, is with Egwene and Naive. So I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting way. And I mean, Rand has met Min, but that's it. So
Right.
I think it's a kind of a cool way to get these characters into the fold, kind of thing.
Agreed. Okay, so we then go back to Kyrene and we see Maureen and Rand, and they go to Maureen's family's house. Moraine is showing again that she's not a very likable character, but her nephew is exceedingly likable, so he's very nice. And they talk about the fact that he's getting married. They once again reinforce this fact that their family were basically becoming destitute and that the sister has worked so hard to ensure that that is not the case. So they're really leaning into this, and I'm not sure why they're spending as much time on this as they absolutely are, but they're name dropping in this scene too, where he's specifically naming like who it is that he's kind of betrothed to. So they're giving you a little bit more information in that. But I will say I did laugh at the "this is pause" Rand, because she just had no idea how to introduce Rand, and I thought that that was appropriate, despite the fact that this scene is like complete fabrication.
Right. Yeah. The one thing I like about this scene is we first finally get I think this is the first time it's mentioned in the show, is the world of dreams.
Yeah.
And Moraine, telling Rand to stay
Stay
awake.
awake.
Stay awake. She can enter the world of dreams. She's very masterful in this realm. She mentions it by its former name, and I'm not going to pronounce it because I have dyslexic and I won't be able to tell you it. So you know what I'm talking about. It starts with a T. But I'm glad they threw this in, because I was a little worried that it wasn't going to happen, because we're not really getting with the wolves. We're not getting actual wolf dreams. We're just getting images. Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Very
exactly. Freddy Krueger and Lanfear are gonna jump
only
ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say only a pretty Freddy Krueger.
Exactly. So this scene, we get back to the White Tower where Varen is
Love this
brown aging the shit out of everybody, and it's great.
God,
I'm living for this. So like this scene between her and Sheriam is interesting, because it almost comes across at first that Sheriam is covering for Leandrin and could herself be a dark friend, and you're like, okay, that's kind of interesting. But then you see not long after the brown Aja being super brown Aja, and they're like, there is a discrepancy in the script. And I was like, yes, academia. Like, this is what academia can do. And I actually really liked that part. So it was interesting that they kind of gave this nuanced scene, and they're like, no, it seems that she's kind of being controlled, possibly, which means deduction time. There's a black Aja in the White Tower. Dun dun dun. And I love that it's the brown Aja that are kind of like figuring all of this out. It's not our green war Aja or our blue Aja. It's book Aja. So I really got into this. Yes, Chris, compulsion, exactly.
Compulsion, yeah.
So I thought
Yeah.
that was a really well done scene because I myself was sitting there thinking, I was like, okay, is Sherry and Black Aja? Like, this is really boring if that's what it's gonna be. But it quickly changed my mind. So I was pleasantly surprised with this whole exchange and this dynamic. How did you love it as much as
Oh, oh yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. This was probably my favorite. There's a big old check mark here. This is my favorite favorite scene.
big check
This
mark?
segment. Yeah, big check mark. I was like, oh yeah. I like seeing, like I mentioned before, I like seeing the different Ajas in play. We got to see red, we got to see blue,
Yeah.
green, yellow. Now we're hitting the browns. And I think it was perfect to bring in Viren. I knew when we got Viren back to the tower. Although my only thing I have on this segment right here is in caps is, where is the ambulance seat?
I know. Where is she? Like, what is going on? I mean, it must have been that they couldn't get the actress for
I was
some
gonna
reason,
say
but
the
I'm like,
actress must be busy.
where is this woman? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I
one in
agree. Like,
four, 1 in 4 eyes said I am black. That's pretty funny. Yeah,
I
but
mean, it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. I was just like, we need to see the Amerlin at some point. And I mean, it's got to be coming in the next few episodes, you would assume, but
mhm.
because of the trailer that we've seen. But realistically, we should have had a lot more of Suan at this point than we have. So, I mean, like, that's what we were thinking, Chris. We think that she's probably in Kyrain based on the background stuff that we were
Yeah,
seeing.
the
And
trailers.
if it seems that Moraine and Rand are going to be staying in Kyrene, which they should be going to Falm at some point, maybe Suan does go there. Like Moraine sends for her because Moraine can't go back to the White Tower until Suan calls for her type thing. I don't know. Maybe we'll get some explanation for it. I just don't know.
But yeah, this whole thing, the way, this is when I talked about earlier. Varen was very book Varen here, just that sort of absent-minded questioning,
Yeah.
uh, as if she's not really interested in the answers, but but then she's kind of very alert to what is going to be said
Yeah.
and stores it away. You can see her storing away the information, and then she
Yeah.
has that small smile on her face. It's like, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't quite add up, kind of thing.
Yes,
So,
exactly. So
yeah,
I
pretty
will say,
cool.
I go ahead. What was your
No, I
last
was going
thought?
to say pretty cool. That's
Yeah,
all I
I
have.
really,
Yeah.
I really liked that. Okay. I laughed when we see Leandrin opening the way gate and all of these girls are still passed out. Like,
Yeah,
I audibly laughed at this point. I was like, come on now. But I
they're
appreciated
all
the fact
they're
we saw
all looped.
horses.
I mean, I'm that Leandra must be working out.
Yeah, exactly.
She
I mean,
she shouldn't be channeling in the ways. So uh,
exactly, exactly. So I mean, like unless Manchin, was defeated by 90 the whole last season, I don't really know. But the conversation that Leandrin has with Lady Serath is good. Like the content is good, the context is good. It's very akin to the conversation in the Great Hunt. So this exchange I think is good.
I
The
I
fact that he says all women, all will be leashed, good.
no, yeah, this is, and I think this is to me how, despite their alliances with the Black, and the Dark One, they still have their cultural differences.
Yeah.
And I like that despite that, Leandrin's still like, this is wrong. You're treating these girls like, they're slaves. They're not. They're powerful Aes Sedai. They should be respected, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I love that cultural that
Yeah,
remains
that difference.
despite their alliances. And I love this whole showdown a little bit with it. And I was looking forward
Yes.
to it. And I was hoping that would play out, that despite everything, the cultural difference between the Sanchen and the way Aes Sedai are just so
Valued.
present.
Yeah. Agreed. And something we kind of brushed over earlier, but is important to say nonetheless, is the exchange between Lady Serath and Ishii, where Ishii reminds her when she's getting a little too pushy that there's a reason she's made this arrangement, basically. And I like that that's kind of being talked about off screen rather than immediately telling us what that motivation is. Like I like not knowing at this point. We know that there's a reason, but we don't need to know what that reason is yet. That to me is better storytelling than we've had in previous episodes. So I was good with that.
Yeah. And then the one thing I liked, I will say differently than the books. Maybe it's a little off, but I do like that Leandrin released 90.
So that was a big change, a big change. And I wrote that down too. I was like, Leandrin helping them.
And I think it's just, well, I think she just did Nynaeve.
She did just do Nynaeve, but
she knows
Nynaeve
she probably did not want Nynaeve to be handed to the Sanchin.
I think in part two, though, she knows Nynaeve is more powerful, right? And Nynaeve, when she's angry, is Hulk.
And she probably wanted a little bit of like some repentance for all that stuff that the Sanchin do to their girls. So she was hoping, I think, a little bit of like, you know, let them see how well they do against, you know, Nynaeve.
Exactly.
And I personally, she did not release Elaine and Egwene. She released Nynaeve, and I think that was a really cool add-in. I think a little bit of addition. I liked it.
It is. It's a good point, Chris. It is strange, and I mean, like we know from the book that Nynaeve does. They do go back to the tower and they tell Siwan that there is a Black Aja specifically. I believe they name Leandrin directly, which they should. But that, it's questionable. Yes. It was classic Nynaeve. I completely agree. So that's fine. But the best thing about Leandrin leaving the tower is that when Leandrin gets back to the tower, Varen's questioning her. And Varen loves white asparagus, apparently, that Leandrin has brought back with her. I thought this whole conversation was hilarious, and it was just further emphasizing my love for Varen this whole episode. I was like, this is perfection with Varen. I love Varen. She's the best. So, yeah, absolutely love her. I love that whole plot line. Okay. So, one of the things that we have talked about a lot, but maybe not to death yet, is we've talked about them condensing Forsaken and which Forsaken that we think they might do. If there's been particular instances in the show that might change the way that they handle other Forsaken going forward in the book. One of the things I mentioned last week was I wondered if Moraine stabbing Lanfear was going to be our Bilal Forsaken encounter. And we start getting information about this dream space, how Lanfear is very much in control of the dream space. And then there's this interaction sequence between her and Ishii. So in this scene, this is interesting because we know from the book Lanfear and book Ishii, it is a contentious relationship. Like, they do not get along, is the general vibe that I get. They have similar goals in that they're both Forsaken, so their goals are similar in that front. But Lanfear's focus is Rand, aka Lews Therin, for herself, and Ishmael's is Lews Therin for the Dark One. Fine. They specifically mention two Forsaken by name in this sequence. And I thought that was interesting because I think that means we are definitely going to see these two Forsaken, because I don't think at this point that they would mention these two by name if we're not going to get them. And it's Moghedien and Grendel that they mentioned specifically. And I was like, good. Because these are people that are relatively important. So it is good that we're getting names of these people now in the hopes, like, this is what I was saying last week that I wish they would have done with Lanfear, is drop a name like a while before she shows up. So you understand that girlfriend's not messing around. So when she is revealed, you're like, oh shit, like, I don't want to mess with that person. So the fact that they're name dropping Forsaken now, I'm like, this is a good step, in my opinion. What did you think of the whole dreamscape conversation of our Forsaken?
Yeah, I agree. We're getting name dropping. I think that's good. I think it's good to establish some of these.
Hi, Bookborn.
I think it's great that we're establishing some of these like later Forsaken book wise
Yeah.
now, so they get a little more prominence. Um, the Grendel and Mogaheden. I think it's interesting that Lanfear calls Mogaheden crazy, because Mogaheden is not. She's actually opposite. She's very calculating.
I think that's kind of the point though, right?
Yeah, she's very careful. She's a little too careful. That's why she's called the spider. That's why she's in the shadows. Spoiler to you because you haven't read the books
I
and
mean, I
gotten to
know all these
Mogaheden
things,
yet,
so it's not that big a deal,
but yeah,
but
but
yeah.
Mogaheden's actually a little more calculating, and it's weird that Lanford called her crazy. Grendel, she did get right. She's vain and narcissistic and all that.
Right.
And then she
And
just said,
crazy. Like
yeah,
Lanfear herself is nuts. From like
and
book
then
Lanfear is crazy ex-girlfriend nuts. And I think maybe that's why it's like it's not knowing yourself. So you're just projecting like girl's crazy. And you're like, no, no, Lanfear.
yeah, and then I thought it was, and then she calls the boys, so we
Yeah.
don't know how many boys. I'm assuming Samuel will be one. He's prominent, as well as probably Demandred, who is going to be prominent and very important probably later. I mean, we've had the discussion of who's probably going to get cut from the list. But I think those two are probably secure. I do want to mention, I see some comments about the dismissing of Semiraj, but I think at first I kind of thought the same. I thought, oh no, please don't omit Semiraj. She's kind of got a cool thing that she does in the books. But I agree with Daniel here, because Lanfear and Semiraj were kind of like odds with each other. They were like pretty much black and white, literally, whereas Lanfear would wear white, Semiraj would wear black.
Yeah.
And they had a love, hate, fear of each other too. So
Right.
because Semiraj is a very sadistic person, she loves torture. It's stated in the book that even the other Forsaken feared her. So
Mhm.
I hope, I hope she did that deliberately, like Daniel said, where
I hope so too,
she
because I would love some depth to Lanfear, not just that crazy ex-girlfriend kind of vibe, but like actual depth to Lanfear, because this is something for me I've talked about at length. The female characters in Wheel of Time aren't fleshed out the way that I feel they deserve to be. And if we get that here, I would be really pleased with that, because I think Lanfear is a very interesting character. And the fact that they've introduced her kind of shows that long game, like they're sticking with Lanfear as a Forsaken. So I hope that we get more character development. But they're really, again, leaning into this trope that Matt is dark. Ishi says Matt was born mine, which this is so not book Matt. Like, it's just not. And we got no Matt this episode. It's just, what is going on with the lack of Matt? Like, I don't understand it, because they've got a new actor. He's available. Use him. So it's just so frustrating, because I feel like the guy that's playing him is doing an excellent job, and they have the tools to correct this storyline. But I'm thinking maybe what they're doing is going to be going for this redemption arc at the end of this season. Exactly, Chris. Matt who. But I'm thinking maybe what they'll do is they're trying to build. Like, Matt's headed to the darkness, but no, wait, he's going to blow the horn of Valir, and then he's redeemed. So that's kind of my last hope at this point, because I'm like, you guys are screwing over Matt so hard. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if it's just because it's still the focus on the girls in the show. Bran, we're starting to give a little more importance to, of course, because he is the dragon. But yeah, Matt is still not there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was actually a big point knocker off for me on this episode. I'm like, another episode with no Matt.
No Matt.
They gotta. I don't know. How do you feel? Do you feel like Matt will blow the horn at the end of this season?
I'm really hoping that he dies. And Patrick, I feel like it's complicated, right? Because in book 2, Matt is still linked to the dagger. And in my mind, that's not Matt, that's Dagger Matt. So I separate those two characters for the most part, because that's not really core Matt. Core Matt is caring, kind, and we see that so much in The Dragon Reborn, where the fact that he goes after the girls, like he's a fool a lot of the time, but he's a well-meaning and well-intentioned person. So he's an immature kid, basically, is how I view Matt, who goes on a journey to maturity, and that's part of what makes him such an interesting character. But I am hoping so much that Matt blows the horn. Like, I feel at this point, if they give it to somebody else, there will be such outrage that I don't know how they would recover with the fan base from that, because it's so core to Matt. So I'm thinking that's got to be what they're doing at this point. Make him seem like he's going to the dark and give him a redemption arc at the end, hopefully.
I definitely want a hero moment here with Matt, because we got the Matt ran away from season 1. Granted, part of that is because of the actor issue with the Matt actor in the first one, but I still think he would have not really have done much regardless in that last episode, even if he was there. I think he probably would have just filled Piran's shoes in the where the horn was. What I hope for this is, of course, the horn. If they're kind of combining books 2 and 3 here, maybe a rescue of the girls, which was something he did for the girls in the Stone of Tyr in book 3. Something. Matt needs his hero moment, and I think it needs to.
He does. And Patrick, I get what you're saying here, but yeah, I mean, yes, he is selfish, but that's all part of being immature, right? Like, that's kind of how I read Matt. Like,
but when it came to the Edmund's Field, he was there for them.
He was, yeah. And again, this is something I've said that I feel that the show does better, genuinely, than the book, is the relationships between the 5, I think, are better fleshed out in the show than they are in the book.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree, Elena. Matt is a guest in the show. And even then, I don't know if he is a guest. He's like an apparition in this show. So one thing I do want to say in terms of the final context of the conversation between Ishii and Lanfear is that they keep calling him Rand and not Lews Therin, which is something that I find so interesting, because I've commented on this to you specifically, Chris, that in the book, it would drive me insane how they only refer to him as Lews Therin. I was like, this is a big change. And I mean, I get why they're doing it, because the TV audience doesn't know Lews in the way that they should at this point. But I did think that was kind of funny that they kept referring to him as Rand. I was like, okay, we're making a very distinctive name change in this, and that's fine. But yeah, other than that, that was kind of that scene.
Yeah, I enjoy any time, both book and show, where we talk about the Forsaken in general and have a little bit of that background of the old lives that they lived. So I'm there for it. So I love the Ishii and Lanfear too.
Alternate lives, though, are alternate lives. They're not the original life, Patrick, but I get what you're saying. I get it. What did we think of that weird bed scene? Elena, are you referencing the one where Rand was giving the looks to people in the room?
When we were talking about the awkwardness, I think I was including this between Lorraine and Rand giving her bedroom eyes, and I just
it was real weird.
I was just very that's right. I think she's talking about Rand just being there,
in the bed. Yeah, it was so weird.
Lanfear. I was like, what?
Yeah, so it was super weird.
Yeah, no, that was
Okay, so we jump back to Falm, and Nynaeve and Elaine managed to escape that whole escapade earlier, and that Egwene was the only one that was captured. This is relatively book appropriate, so it's fine. The fact that she's not leashed immediately, not book appropriate, but whatever. The fact that they've put on like zero disguise and are walking straight into Falm, I was like, who thought up this plan?
especially Elaine.
I
know. I think in the books, doesn't she dye her hair?
I think she did something to like change her appearance.
And because, I mean, she's the flippant daughter.
I know. It was so awkward. I was sitting there
just because your face is a little dirty doesn't.
I know. It's like, no one will recognize me with this shawl. I was like, what is going on?
It's like, and I do find it funny that like somebody like immediately like recognizes.
I know, like so fast. So
But
that was funny.
I
But
I
go ahead.
the one note I have to say here, and this is a knock on Naive, I'm getting tired of both Egwene and Naive treating Elaine like shit.
Yep.
And that's coming from somebody who doesn't like Elaine.
I know you don't.
Book Elaine. Book Elaine. I know in the books, Naive and Elaine argue a lot. They do have clashing opinions because they're both strong-willed. So that's going to happen. But Egwene, there was, I think it was last episode where Egwene was kind of just like dismissing Elaine and all that. That would never happen to me. I don't know. I'm a little over the Elaine bashing. It's like, she's pretty smart. You gotta listen to her. She could be annoying, but listen to her.
She does seem to know like more of what's going on because she's been raised for this. But Nynaeve's being kind of classic Nynaeve, and that she's being really rude.
And it is classic. But I did want to point it out because
I appreciate it.
That was for you. That was for you.
Yes, and I value that so much. So we meet a new warder and we meet a yellow Aja, which is interesting because this is obviously going to become Nynaeve's Aja, is the yellow Aja, healer Aja. We know that a little bit about the yellow Aja, but we haven't really seen much of them. The only yellow Aja that I think we've seen is the one that was being burned by Valda in the first season.
And I think we get a glimpse of them in the healing house for Perrin.
Right, but it's
nobody named.
Exactly. We don't get a named Aja exactly. So this is interesting.
No, you recently read
I did.
Great Hunt. Wasn't there a active Aes Sedai in Falm?
There was.
And then she gets collared, and then she kind of like, and then the girls meet her, and she's like totally lost her like.
I believe there was two of them. I could be wrong, but Chris, if you just read this, please let me know if I'm incorrect. I believe that there were two of them. One does get collared and one doesn't. There might have even been three. I'm possibly
and she gets so broken that she like actually betrays.
Yes, exactly. She wants to basically just die because it's absolutely horrible what they're doing.
I'm wondering if this Aes Sedai is going to probably fill that role.
It's quite possible, yeah. I mean, in the preview for next week, yes, Rima is the Aes Sedai who gets collared.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. So there was two. Thank you, Chris. That's what I thought, and both get collared. Okay.
Okay, collared. I do think one is a little more strong-willed and was able to like
withstand it a bit better.
Or I think when the rescue was coming, I think they tried to rescue both of them, and one of them was like refused and was screaming, and yeah,
exactly. That kind of gets played out more by the end, which of course is sad because we see that like what happens if. Okay, so the leashing scene. All right, we see that they've like prepped Egwene with a new hairdo, so that's fine. I want to go back though to one thing earlier, and I completely jumped over this, so I'm sorry. When they're chasing after Nynaeve and Elaine, do they only have this one girl like with her pacifier in her mouth? It's like they have how many captured Aes Sedai or novices, whatever, but they only use this one girl. I was like, come on now, like you guys have plenty more, but that's besides the point. So the leash scene was good, asterisk, in that I didn't feel it conveyed the severity from the book, but I was greatly pleased that there was actually a physical leash. Like that to me was the main thing, because when I read it, my visceral reaction was to the idea of being leashed. Like it's one thing if you have a collar on, like you can justify that as a choker or a necklace kind of thing, but a leash, that stepped it up a game for me. So I was very appreciative of the fact that they did this in terms of costuming in this scene. I found it was very important. But what did you think of our leashing, collaring scene?
I was gonna say I was like, ooh, physical. I wrote ooh, physical leash. So I liked it. The actress of Egwene. Name's not coming to my head right now, but really pulled that off really well. How it is affecting her, and I'm glad we saw that open. This is going to be tough. I know
Yeah.
next episode, particularly even from what we saw of the preview at the end, it's going to be a really tough episode.
Yeah.
And I remember reading the book and just oh god, it was so tough.
It's intense.
And
yeah.
This was my moment where I actually like up until this moment, I thought Egwene was wallpaper in the books.
Mm-hmm.
She was very uninteresting to me. And then it's sad that it takes something like torture and humiliation and this grueling ordeal that she goes through.
Yes.
For me to appreciate her, but yeah, I just this is the scene that I really just hope really plays out really. I hate to say it, but brutal. I think it needs to be as uncomfortable as possible.
As it should be.
Really,
yeah, I think so too.
To really have the effect that it's going to.
I think so too. If it's going to land the way that it does when you read it, you need to feel uncomfortable when you see it.
And I mean, we have 3 episodes left. I hope it doesn't get wrapped. I honestly hope it doesn't get wrapped up next episode. I hope it.
Yeah, I mean, it might.
I hope it lasts at least 2 episodes. I need it to feel like it's just because this
desperate. I feel like
through the book 14. This is in her head from book 14. I mean, She is talking. I will not be leashed again. I will not be collared. I mean, it was just like you feel that anguish in her, and I think it needs to have that effect.
Yeah, I agree, MJ. So Egwene this season, they've kind of gone a little bit of that Moraine route, I feel like, in that they've changed a lot of her personality from the first season, and this is horrific to her character. And she does show such perseverance and strength in the book that this is a very good opportunity for that. So I hope it's something that they don't shy away from. But if we were correct in that, I think Elena was the one that told us last time that episode 8 was something like blowing of the horn or something like that, implying that the battle is going to be in episode 8. In the books, they're rescued in that battle type thing. It's around, like, everything culminates in that time. Yeah. So my hope is that this will kind of ride out until the end of the season and it'll be resolved then. And then this is something that her character will carry with her for the remainder of the series, because it is such a core thing for her character in the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. But and the presentation I thought was good. At first I wasn't understanding. I'm a little worried about putting the baby pacifier in her mouth. I don't want to see it on her. You can put it on the nobody characters, but I really don't want to see it on her. I want to see her face, because this is the actress's moment to really have that, and to lose the facial expressions is going to be really hard.
I agree. Okay, so we jump back to our kind of final sequence, and this is a conversation between Maureen and her sister, which they kind of reminisce about advice that Maureen had given her sister. This scene to me is fine. I don't really care for it all that much. It kind of just feels like filler. And then we get to the bigger scene, which is okay. A couple things in this scene that I want to point out. So I have mentioned this on previous episodes, in that the verbiage that is used to describe Lews Therin Telamon as being the Dragon Reborn is highly confusing. And again, they refer to him as the Dragon Reborn. She says Lews Therin Telamon, Lanfear was in love with him, the Dragon Reborn. Fine. The thing that drove me wild in this scene was specifically that Maureen says, there's not much information from before the breaking, but here's all this information on Lanfear. I was like, you have contradicted yourself in 2 sentences. I get that we have some primary source material that has survived, fine, but when you immediately follow that from, we have nothing from before the breaking, it was like, Um, so that was fine. But they decide that Lanfear is probably in love with Rand the same way that she was weirdly in love with Lou Theron, and that they can trust her to not necessarily hurt him because they've been together now for several months. So Rand kind of reluctantly agrees once again. She does give him agency though in this scene. She says, "It is your choice and I mean it this time," type thing. So I feel like that is good to note that they're starting to have a different dynamic in the sense that now that he is established as being the dragon, that she kind of has to give him that authority to make decisions on his own. She can't just tell him what to do. So that's good at least. Yeah, so good. But okay. So the last thing I'm really going to say, and then you can give me your opinion on this scene. When he gets into the dream world, the outfit that Lanfear is wearing, what is happening? So I mentioned this to my husband because I laughed out loud at this outfit. I was like, what is girlfriend wearing? Like, oh my good Lord. And my husband and I are massive fans of Arrested Development, and specifically David Cross's character in Arrested Development. And in season 1 of Arrested Development, he has a scene where he goes, "Do you have something that says daddy likes leather?" And the shopkeeper leans in and goes, "Do you mean like leather daddy?" And he goes, "Is there such a thing?" And that is exactly what we thought for Lanfear in this final scene. It was just ridiculous. But what did you think of our final sequence?
Well, for one, I'm glad the wheel thing that we saw in all those previews was a dream. Dream sequence. I'm glad it's not like something that actually happens like in the real world. The outfit was a little ridiculous, over the top. I don't who said that? Elena. Yeah. I don't think
what Lanfear in white. Girlfriend's all in black. Leather daddy black.
I was getting a sexualized I felt like I was getting a sexualized Semiraj moment here. I mean, it's all black. I was like, she's all about white purpose. And hope Dan knows the safe word.
100%.
It was hard to take this scene seriously.
Yeah.
Honestly. I get it. You know, you are in love with him, but this is just bizarre.
It was so weird. It was so weird. Like,
it was like cringe. I was just cringed. I was like,
it was cringy. Honestly, it was super cringy. And like, Lanfear in the clothes that she has been wearing is super attractive. Like, you didn't need to change it, because I would almost think that she would want to present herself as the figure that Rand has been allured to for the last several months, as opposed to this dominatrix leather daddy Lanfear. I was like, this just seems weird, and agreed. It was way too much makeup. I liked how they had presented Celine in that she had a bit of eyeliner, but like still was a total fox, honestly. Like the way that they had done up Lanfear was perfect.
And even when she kind of revealed herself with Ishmael, the scenes with Ishmael, I think she looked really, she had a dark presence, but it wasn't,
and was wearing white.
And she was wearing white, and it wasn't overdone. It looked really good, and it still gave her a menacing look.
Yes.
So, I think this is just like just maybe deliberately over the top. I hope that once they start talking in this scene or whatever we're going to play out, we'll change the scene. It's just a little weird to me.
That was my last comment on this episode. I have LOL as large as I can. What is she wearing? Because it was just, it took me so out of the episode. I was like,
I wrote yikes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so bad. So I had super cringeworthy moments with that. But as I said, going into this episode, there were things about this episode that I very much liked. There were things that I was kind of middle of the road on. And then there was stuff like that I thought was just terrible. So I still don't know where it is I fall on this episode. I feel like it's probably a 6. And because of the fact that I loved the stuff with Varen so much, I thought that was just so good in this episode. I really valued how they did that. But
yeah, I get it. I think I had a hard time rating this one myself,
Yeah.
honestly, because a lot of it's new, but at the same time, a lot of it does get us back a little bit
Yes.
on track if we go by the books.
Yeah.
Getting the girls captured, or at least Egwene. I was absolutely thrilled with all the Varen scenes. I still appreciated Perrin and more of the wolves, and then of course introducing Avienda. Great thing there. The last moments of Leandrin. I think we might actually have a Leandrin break.
Maybe.
I mean, we'll see. Maybe we'll just add some more additional scenes with her and Viren.
Probably.
But I don't know what she could be doing now unless we continue to follow her own storyline, maybe separate like we're following Moiraine's. But quite honestly, I'm enjoying Leandrin actually more than Moiraine. I just Moiraine has, every time I said this to my spouse when we were watching the show, it's like, I really don't want to be dreading Moiraine scenes.
Yeah, but I do.
It's like I'm just, I want to get something back on track with her character a little more. Something they introduced, the wheel scene felt. Yeah, it did. I agree, Daniel, and I said it. I think it. Yeah, I think her look was a little more too off because of that black light thing hatred with she has with Semiraj, and she likes to deliberately keep herself separated from. So but yeah, that was definitely a Grendel thing because she's not really at that, and she was just criticizing Grendel for being that way and silly and vain and all that. But I do think they're getting better.
Well, that's good because we've got a few episodes left. We're over the halfway point. I feel like we've got a lot to cover in the next few episodes. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how we wrap everything up. If you watch, okay, so did you watch the behind the scenes thing with Rafe where he kind of talked about?
No, because every time I watch those, I get angry. I don't know.
Okay.
There's something in the way
I did get angry. So if people,
there's a way he approaches the material, and it's just like,
it's enraging.
I feel like he just says, I just do what I want, kind of thing every time I watch one of those. So I don't. Exactly. I did watch the preview for the next.
Okay. So basically Rafe was saying this episode was to set up the fact that we now know like how dangerous the Forsaken are. I was like, except we still don't, because we don't know enough about the Forsaken yet. But I'm hoping going forward we will learn more about the Forsaken, especially now too that they've name dropped 2 more Forsaken. Next week we know that it's going to be an Egwene heavy episode. I think Elena said earlier that episode 6 and 7 is what Suan is credited for, so maybe we'll get that in the next episode. That would be good, but hopefully a bit more Matt would be nice, but I'm not getting my hopes up. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our episode 5 discussion. Thank you for all of your comments and engagement, as we always appreciate and value it. We will be back a week from today to discuss episode 6. Any final thoughts before we take off here?
No, I'm looking not forward, but forward to Egwene's. Those scenes looked intense from the previews we saw, the eyes and her face, and it's going to be rough. I think it's going to be a rough episode.
I think so too. Elena, if this is the case, maybe I'll get my prologue. I'm still holding out hope that we're going to get the prologue at some point. I want it so badly, but who knows?
Appreciate the
Thank
comments,
you,
guys.
Alexander. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.